Good morning and welcome to Fake Not, the community of professionals that are working hard to build sustainable brands in the era of fake. Today I have with me Christina Keibler. She is the engagement director and head of research at a New Mexico nonprofit. She is also an applied anthropologist, and she's got 20 years experience of conducting research for the Pentagon, a lot of national agencies, a lot of businesses interested in deep dive discovery and change making. She also founded the online community Rural Spin and is a fiber artist. And you can see her work at ChristinaKeibler.com. I will put that link in the notes when we publish and promote this a little bit later. Really recommend going out and taking a look, though. Some great work. So, Christina, I'm really glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Kent. That was really sweet. Appreciate that.
Well, we've worked together in the past, had some great conversations, and it's always an honor for me to be able to bring on some of the people who I think have influenced the way I think a lot. And our first work was around beer, as I recall.
Yes. Yeah, right?
Always a good topic to start with. But one of the reasons I was really happy to have you and be able to talk about this is, we were chatting about some of the things to talk about, and I think you have you're very passionate and very strongly held beliefs about sustainability, about local, about a lot of ways by which brands need to think about operating in the future. And the reason I think, as we were talking about different things, and local really struck me as the topic that we should talk about, is I work with a lot of agencies, a lot of consultants, and it seems like the whole theme now is being purpose-driven, authenticity, you name all the sustainability, you name all the popular things that people are interested in, and that seems to be like what we should be thinking about, what we should be doing. So it's a lot of talk, but there's not a lot of action about it. And so when you suggested that local might be, the idea of local and the concept of local might be something we should talk about, it really resonated with me. And so I wanted to spend a little time just talking about understanding what local means. And a twist I'll put on that is actually appreciating what local means, because I know for me, as I started looking at it and then trying to understand what it meant, and then you and I had a little dialogue back and forth. What does that term actually mean? Can you define it in a very specific way?
Yes and no. On the one hand, there's a concept of geography where, if you look at the literature, and there's a fair amount of it since about the 90s, local means something that is within 100 and about 500 miles production from the point of purchase. So that can be food, or typically associated with food, but it can really be anything that is produced, clothing, art, pottery, whatever the case may be. But from the point where it's purchased, it's made between 100 and 500 miles between that point. But the 500-mile mark was really a reflection of how long it takes to drive in a day. So just that far out from the point of purchase. So that's one aspect of it, and that's the pretty simple, basic aspect of it. Then you have this whole other issue that's more related to culture. So, let's say you live in the Bronx or in Manhattan. It's pretty easy to buy a lot of local things within a very small radius of where you live, simply because there's a higher population density, and it doesn't take you long outside of Manhattan or New York City to get to farms in upstate New York, where you can live in one of the largest cities in the world and also have access to some really nice local produce, handmade purses, dishes, clothing, almost whatever you would need, you could get locally. On the other side, there is a state like New Mexico, where I live, which is one of the most sparsely populated states in the United States. And there are communities where, you literally have to drive 2.5 hours to even get to a grocery store. Um, so local in those situations is much more difficult to do. So you would have to drive or travel much farther to be able to access a wide variety of local products, whatever those may be. So local, it's a combination of geography and the culture in which you live. And it's a kind of a delicate balancing act to really get an idea of what it means for different communities in the United States and worldwide.
Hmm. So it's interesting. One of the things that struck me as you were describing that is, so for example, if you're in the Bronx, and you're thinking about food production, there's just weather related aspects that sometimes force you to have to buy produce from different locales and so forth. And what are your thoughts? So one of the things that I was telling you about this restaurant that I visited over the weekend, where they were giving a talk about what they're doing, Tender Greens, and they're great believers, and they're doing a lot of R&D in the whole area of hydroponics. And in fact, they take the big shipping carts that they that are just stacked up everywhere. There's a company that takes those, and they're growing produce in these shipping carts using hydroponics. Funny thing being, most of the technology of hydroponics has come from the marijuana industry, which is interesting little factoid I learned. But so what are your thoughts around, so they're opening a restaurant in New York. They're going to ship one of these containers so that they can grow produce of a very specific quality and type, but have it be there. So what are your thoughts about that? I mean, I thought that was an interesting way to apply technology to still allowing local produce and local involvement.
Yeah, that's a great idea for a variety of reasons. And there's different aspects of what you're talking about, but for the hydroponics, um, it's a good. There's a lot of recycling of things like water and fertilizer and whatnot in hydroponic systems, so they can be very environmentally sound systems. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea of having it close to a restaurant is wonderful because, or even any kind of sales outlet, the fresher the food is, the more nutritious it is. So purchasing locally grown food or food within a close proximity of where it's consumed is just better for all of us from a health perspective. Um, there's also other ways to do that involve season extenders for farmers who don't grow hydroponically. Just hoop houses or greenhouses where you can grow things year round. Um, and there's ways to do it where you take advantage of the sun, so it's more of a solar heating type of thing, so that the drain on the environmental resources is not as large. The other side of that is eating seasonally, which is something we culture have kind of abandoned and forgotten about, and we've lost our appreciation for that, which is a shame. Um, there's something about eating a tomato when it's meant to be eaten, in August or September, that you really can't replicate any other time of year, even if it's grown in a hoop house or a hot house or something like that. And people have lost an appreciation for winter vegetables. Just speaking of that, and there's kind of an idea for that. Squash is delicious. Potatoes are delicious, and apples are delicious. All of these things can be stored successfully through the winter, and they still taste better. And in fact, for some squash, getting some, a cold freeze on them, or things like Brussels sprouts or kale, and it makes them taste even better. So a combination of the two would really enhance local eating for people in various locations.
So interesting. It seems like we can get really focused on particular definitions of what local means. For example, like the geography, but it seems like we can look at it in a much broader way. Something that we discussed before the show was that at the heart of local is this broader idea of sustainability, or said another way, the practice of being sustainable. So the idea is in looking at what is being produced or sold, is it being sustainably created? So I think we tend to talk about food a lot because it really food production really comes from the desire to be more sustainable, reducing environmental impact, enhancing the community impact. So when we talk about local, for many things, we really are talking about being sustainable. So I was hoping that you wouldn't mind sharing some of your broader thoughts about how these two concepts are so interrelated.
The concept of local really grew out of wanting to be sustainable. It's not so much that being local is inherently fantastic, but it's the sustainability of whatever you are producing or trying to accomplish that does make it fantastic. So that's the root, is the sustainability, and that includes a variety of things. You know, not only environmental resources, but also just like time. You know, the time it takes to do things, the relationships that you have with those around you, and how easy it is to create connections and communication that will make things just more productive. But overall, you know, focusing on the balance of whatever system you're working with an eye towards being able to continue to do it, um, you know, managing your resources in the best possible way. So it's, you know, the least amount of uh, intensive labor and resources going in, and you get the most benefit coming out for the people that it's intended to benefit. Um, so that's really most of what the local movement is about. And I think a lot of times the two get separated. Um, then people don't really care about local because they don't really understand the whole picture of why it's a benefit.
So listening listening to this makes me just think about how good old fashioned human nature plays a role. We so often try to just define things so restrictively, making them all or nothing. And what really strikes me is thinking about what you're saying is that we have to think in terms of balance. That there's often going to be many different approaches, solutions, ways of thinking about addressing a particular need. So if you're thinking as a business owner or a brand manager about how you can be more connected, more engaged with your local community, it doesn't have to be this all or nothing. You can start small, really focused, and then look for ways to balance what are probably going to be some of the conflicting short-term priorities.
Absolutely. Um, One of the things that is kind of a branding problem for the term local itself is that people kind of think it's an all or nothing scenario. And it's really not. You know, just like anything in life, there's gradations and degrees of what you can and cannot do. And you just need to be able to make the best choices that you can based upon what you're looking at. You know, for example, you know, if you're a company that makes, I don't know, what do companies make? If you're a company that makes hoses, let's say, uh, you're just the best damn hose maker that there is. But there's no way, you know, you might be able to produce that where you choose to have your headquarters. And you know, maybe there's just not the manpower, the facilities to do so. You know, you need a access to a larger power source. Who knows what the potential is there? So how, in those cases, how do you try to do your best to choose to be local whenever you can? Well, you know, make sure that the staff that you hire in the locations that you have your operations are local. You know, don't ship them in from other places. You know, make sure that, you know, or try to, that you use local graphic artists for your advertising instead of Bill Burnett all the time. make sure that the uh, benefits that you have for your employees, try to get them through local providers. Try to buy insurance from local providers in the town that you're living. Don't just automatically go with the cheapest version, in a bigger metropolitan area. All those kinds of things feed into having a local focus for your company as much as you are able to, depending upon what you're making.
The reason we started this community was our belief that building trust isn't just a formula that you can apply or a campaign on the surface, but it's rather a way of operating across all the different areas of your company. When you think about it, shareholders, owners, managers, employees, customers, and how all those are interrelated. So I'm thinking that what's key is when, as a company, and you're starting to share your intention or communicating an effort, it has to be easily explainable and understandable as to how those actions translate into a local benefit. So as a local, you can hear it and say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I see where that's going. And they understand that you have their community's best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just taking care of the people that you're employing and appreciating them as employees goes a long way in a lot of companies. Work gets, and if the community at large knows that the employees of your company are getting a living wage, they're getting some decent health coverage, that you care about the education of their children, communities appreciate that. Even if they're not directly employed by you, they recognize that you're doing your part as a company or a brand to take care of the people who are basically making your company possible.
Okay, not to get into something political here because that's never a good idea. But when you think about the recent tax cuts and how a number of employees are receiving bonuses based on those, short term, you can look at it and say, oh man, that's great. It's benefiting employees, and that should really enhance people's perceptions of the companies that are providing those. But I really question if it will, because first, it's a short-term occurrence, and it's really not related to the local communities, other than, yeah, that money will be flowing into households at that level, but it doesn't seem intentional by those companies, and it almost seems like a PR move to me.
Yeah, throwing money at people, that's easy for companies to do. Because typically, not all companies, there's a lot of companies out there that are, running pretty lean, but, giving a single bonus, that doesn't, that's easy to do. Uh, but giving, living wage, that's an investment. That's a long-term, consistent, week-to-week investment that you're making. And, it's kind of solid. You can't really take that back. With a bonus, you can just give one, and that's the end of it. It doesn't necessarily speak to a long-term investment in employees.
So to kind of pull together from all of that, the key is really about intention and commitment. And that even if you decide to start small, there has to be an ongoing intentional effort toward greater locality, greater sustainability. And so it's really not a checklist and not a campaign, and it's certainly not just throwing money at it through bonuses or contributing to the chamber or just sponsoring things. Okay, I'm going to throw out a degree of difficulty for you here. One of the objections that you often hear from national brands is it's just not cost effective to be local. They've developed broad national systems that maximize efficiency and really help them to keep prices low. So how would you respond to those pushbacks from the Walmarts, the Targets, the Macy's of the world that argue that scale and efficient distribution preempts a move toward a more local business model?
Yeah, so many thoughts. That could be a whole different. Yeah. But there are things that they can do. They're basically they could adjust their model, and it would take work, but I think ultimately they're going to need to do that in the long run. People as a whole are starting to not be so impressed by the big box model, which is one of the reasons why Amazon sales are starting to go up. Um, so they really were competing on the convenience platform in a lot of different ways, but they're, now, I just got a Amazon shipment today, and it's Martin Luther King Day. Post offices aren't running, so um, big box stores need to start thinking twice about what they're really providing and looking to see what they're going to fill that in with. And the whole sustainability and taking care of local communities, I think, is probably a really good thing to do because it's something that you can advertise it and make a lot of headway, but it's got to be real, as it cannot be fake. It's got to be, it has to be real. So what are some of the things they can do? They can start by hiring other businesses, vendors in each local community. Would it be more difficult for them to do so? Sure. Would it be impossible? Absolutely not. It would, for companies like Walmart or Target, they have the staff that they could do that. But they make as much money? No, but they make an obscene amount already. So I'm not sure why they wouldn't want to invest in communities that are supporting them. Um, again, getting back to our previous conversation about employee benefits, I don't think we need to talk about that again, but that's something they do. But stores that, like Walmart who sell groceries, they could easily purchase their produce from local farmers. All they would need would be a value chain coordinator, which is a position that basically connects farmers in a community to a store, and makes sure that the flow of produce is coordinated in a fashion that makes a lot of sense to both the consumer and the outlet. But in that way, well, one, the quality of the produce would be a hell of a lot better, but you'd also be supporting the local communities. And the same goes for, meats. Instead of just having this factory farmed operations, which people, that's going to start going by the wayside, I think, because there's an increased interest in getting food that is locally produced in a more sustainable, humane fashion. If big box stores started to look towards things like that, it would make a big difference. For things that are not food related, buy blankets that are made locally, buy dishes that are made locally, and have them as an option for people. Soap, body care products, all these kinds of things can be sourced locally. And just think impact for the local economy if all of a sudden you've got a store like Walmart who's buying locally, the people who live in the communities are going there to shop. It just would have a benefit all around for pretty much everyone.
So, I think that really gets back to the point we were talking about earlier, where this doesn't have to be all or nothing at first, that you can just take some really basic, concrete steps to move ahead. But I do feel that established companies, and probably mostly larger companies, find it a challenge to appreciate and support the amount of work and effort that's required to shift toward a business model that is all about impact. Impact on the environment, impact on employees, on the communities in which it exists. So I think that companies that make this a really high priority in their strategic planning and take this to heart as the foundation underneath everything they do are going to be the ones that stand the best chance of existing in what seems to be a fairly uncertain future.
Yes. And it wouldn't really be easy, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Just because something is easy doesn't make it better. And just because something's more difficult doesn't make it worse. Um, it's just something that I think needs to happen for reasons. And just being able to tell a community, look, we want to be more local and be support the community. We're starting out with this little thing. It doesn't seem like much, but our intentions are there. This is what we're doing. Because those points, those little baby steps, they can mean a lot for not only community, but also a brand or a company who is looking for some advertising to get the word out about what they are doing to be more local and more sustainable to benefit those around them.